The sun was shining brightly over London as Jason Statham opened his eyes that Sunday morning. He felt refreshed after a good night's sleep. Jason was known all over the world for his tough guy roles in action movies, but at home he was just a regular man who loved simple pleasures. He stretched his arms and got out of bed feeling ready for another peaceful day. Jason walked to his kitchen and made himself a cup of strong coffee. The smell filled his house and made him smile. He loved these quiet moments before the world woke up. Through his window he could see his neighbors were still sleeping. Everything was calm and perfect. This was exactly how Jason liked to start his weekends. After drinking his coffee, Jason put on his workout clothes. Even on his days off, he never skipped his morning exercise routine. This was one of the secrets that kept him in such great shape for his movie roles. He went down to his home gym and started lifting weights. The gym was filled with all kinds of equipment that helped him stay strong and fit. For the next hour, Jason worked out hard. He did push-ups, sit-ups, and lifted heavy weights. Sweat poured down his face, but he kept going. Exercise was not just about staying in shape for Jason. It was also his way of clearing his mind and preparing for whatever the day might bring. When he finished his workout, he felt energized and ready for anything. After his shower, Jason heard a familiar sound that always made him happy. It was the sound of paws running across his wooden floor. Bruno, his beloved dog, was awake and excited to see him. Bruno was a medium-sized mixed-breed dog with brown and white fur. His tail wagged so fast it looked like it might fall off. Jason had adopted Bruno 3 years ago from a local animal shelter. When Jason first saw Bruno, the dog was scared and skinny. He had been abandoned by his previous owners and did not trust people anymore. But Jason saw something special in those sad brown eyes. He knew Bruno just needed someone to love him and take care of him. It took months for Bruno to trust Jason completely. At first, Bruno would hide under furniture when Jason came home. He was afraid of loud noises and sudden movements. Jason was very patient with him. He spoke softly to Bruno and never forced him to do anything he did not want to do. Slowly, Bruno began to understand that Jason was different from the people who had hurt him before. Now Bruno was a completely different dog. He was happy, confident, and full of energy. He followed Jason everywhere around the house. When Jason was reading, Bruno would lie next to him on the couch. When Jason was cooking, Bruno would sit in the kitchen hoping for a small treat. They had become best friends in every way. Jason looked at Bruno and smiled. Today would be perfect for a long walk in the park. Bruno seemed to read his mind because he ran to the door where his leash was hanging. He knew the signs that meant they were going outside. Bruno loved their walks almost as much as Jason did. The local park was only a 10-minute walk from Jason's house. It was a beautiful place with green grass, tall trees, and a small pond where ducks liked to swim. Many people from the neighborhood brought their dogs there every day. Jason and Bruno had made many friends during their regular visits to the park. Jason put on his casual clothes and grabbed Bruno's leash. Bruno was so excited he could barely stand still, while Jason attached the leash to his collar. As soon as they stepped outside, Bruno started pulling gently toward the direction of the park. He knew exactly where they were going. The morning air was fresh and cool. Jason took a deep breath and felt grateful for this perfect day. He had no idea that in less than an hour his peaceful Sunday would turn into something that would change both his and Bruno's lives forever. But for now, everything was perfect, and they were both happy to be together, enjoying another beautiful morning. Jason and Bruno walked through the park entrance, feeling happy and relaxed. The morning sun was getting warmer and more people were starting to arrive with their dogs. Bruno wagged his tail as he recognized some of his doggy friends from previous visits. This was his favorite time of day, when he could explore all the interesting smells and sounds of the park. They walked along their usual path toward the large open field where dogs could run and play freely. Bruno knew this routine by heart. First, they would walk around the pond, then visit the area near the playground, and finally reach the big field where he could chase tennis balls and play with other dogs. Jason enjoyed watching Bruno be so happy and free. As they approached the playground area, Jason noticed something that made him feel uncomfortable. Near the swing sets stood a man with two very large dogs. The dogs were much bigger than Bruno, and they looked different from the friendly pets that usually visited the park. These dogs were pulling hard on their leashes and making loud, aggressive barking sounds. The man holding the leashes looked frustrated and angry. He was shouting at his dogs, but they were not listening to him at all. Jason could see that the man had no control over his animals. The dogs were dragging him around, and he seemed scared of them. This was not normal behavior for dogs or their owners in this peaceful park. Jason slowed down his walking pace and gently pulled Bruno closer to him. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, both in his movie career and in real life. Something about this situation felt dangerous. Bruno sensed Jason's tension and looked up at him with curious eyes. The friendly dog did not understand why they had stopped walking toward their favorite playing area. The two large dogs continued barking and lunging forward on their leashes. Other dog owners in the area started moving away from the aggressive animals. Parents quickly picked up their small children who had been playing on the swings and slides. Everyone could feel that something bad might happen at any moment. Jason tried to change direction and walk Bruno around the problematic area. He hoped to avoid any trouble and continue their peaceful morning walk. But the aggressive dogs had already noticed Bruno. They turned their attention toward him and became even more excited and violent in their behavior. Their barking got louder and more threatening. The man with the aggressive dogs was clearly not an experienced dog owner. He did not know how to calm his animals down or control their behavior. Jason could see that the leashes the man was using were not strong enough for such large and powerful dogs. The metal clips looked old and weak. Jason felt his heart start beating faster as he realized how dangerous this situation was becoming. Bruno was still unaware of the danger. He was a friendly dog who had never been in a fight with another animal. In his mind, all dogs were potential friends who might want to play with him. He started wagging his tail and showing interest in meeting the two large dogs. Jason knew this innocent behavior could trigger an attack from the aggressive animals. Other people in the park were now watching the scene unfold. Some were taking out their phones to record what might happen. Others were calling for help or trying to move their own pets to safety. The peaceful Sunday morning atmosphere had completely changed into something tense and frightening. Jason made a quick decision to try walking away from the area as fast as possible. But just as he started to move, the worst thing that could happen occurred. One of the aggressive dogs broke free from its weak leash and was now running directly toward Bruno with its teeth showing and murder in its eyes. Time seemed to move in slow motion as the aggressive dog charged toward Bruno with deadly intent. Jason watched in horror as the large animal covered the distance between them in just a few powerful leaps. Bruno was still looking around innocently, completely unaware that death was racing toward him at full speed. The attacking dog was a pit bull mix with massive jaws and muscles that rippled under its dark coat. Jason tried to pull Bruno away, but it was too late. The aggressive dog slammed into Bruno with the force of a truck hitting a small car. Bruno let out a terrified yelp as he was knocked to the ground by the impact. The larger dog immediately went for Bruno's throat, which was the most dangerous place to attack. Its huge jaws clamped down on Bruno's neck like a steel trap. Bruno cried out in pain and terror as the attacking dog began shaking him violently from side to side. This was not play fighting or normal dog behavior. This was a killer trying to end another animal's life as quickly as possible. Bruno's legs kicked helplessly in the air as he tried to escape, but the larger dog was too strong and too determined to let go. Blood began to appear on Bruno's white and brown fur. The red liquid looked terrible against his normally beautiful coat. Jason could see that the attacking dog's teeth had punctured deep into Bruno's neck area. If this continued for much longer, Bruno would die from blood loss or from having his neck broken by the violent shaking motion. Other people in the park were screaming and shouting, but no one knew what to do. Some were calling the police on their phones, while others were trying to get their own dogs and children to safety. The man who owned the attacking dog was yelling at his animal, but doing nothing helpful to stop the attack. He seemed frozen with fear and shock. Jason felt his military training and movie stunt experience kick in automatically. All those years of learning fight choreography and martial arts techniques had prepared him for moments like this, even though he never expected to use those skills to save his dog's life. He knew he had only seconds to act before Bruno's injuries became fatal. The attacking dog was completely focused on Bruno and did not see Jason approaching from the side. Jason moved quickly but carefully because one wrong move could make the situation worse. He needed to be smart about how he handled this life or death emergency. The aggressive dog was in a killing frenzy and would probably attack anyone who tried to interfere. Bruno was getting weaker as more blood flowed from his wounds. His cries were becoming softer, which was a very bad sign. Jason knew that when animals stopped making noise during an attack, it usually meant they were close to dying. He could not let that happen to his best friend. Jason reached the fighting dogs and immediately assessed the situation like he was planning a movie stunt. He needed to separate the animals without getting attacked himself and without causing more damage to Bruno. The pit bull mix was much larger than Bruno and its jaws were locked in place like a vice grip. People watching from a distance held their breath as Jason prepared to risk his own safety to save Bruno. Nobody knew if the famous action star could handle a real-life emergency the same way he handled movie scenes. This was not a scripted fight with safety measures and professional stunt coordinators. This was raw, violent reality where one mistake could result in serious injury or death for both Jason and Bruno. Jason moved like lightning toward the attacking dog, but his actions were calculated and precise. Years of martial arts training for his movie roles had taught him exactly how to handle dangerous situations without making them worse. He knew that panicking or using too much force could result in more damage to Bruno or serious injury to himself. The aggressive dog was so focused on Bruno that it did not notice Jason approaching from behind. Jason could see that the animal's jaws were locked in what dog experts call a death grip. Simply pulling on the dog would not work and might cause the teeth to tear deeper into Bruno's neck. He needed a more sophisticated approach that would force the attacking dog to release its hold voluntarily. Jason remembered a technique he had learned from a professional animal trainer during the filming of one of his action movies. The trainer had shown him how to safely control aggressive animals using pressure points and specific holds that would not cause permanent harm. Jason had never expected to use this knowledge in real life, but now it might be the only thing that could save Bruno. Moving swiftly, Jason positioned himself behind the attacking dog and wrapped his arm around its neck in a modified sleeper hold. This was not meant to hurt the animal, but to temporarily cut off blood flow to its brain. The technique required perfect timing and pressure. Too little pressure would not work, and too much could cause permanent damage or death. The attacking dog immediately sensed the new threat and tried to turn around to attack Jason while still holding Bruno in its jaws. But Jason had positioned himself perfectly, and the dog could not reach him without releasing Bruno first. Jason applied steady pressure to the specific points on the dog's neck that would cause it to lose consciousness safely. Within 30 seconds, the aggressive dog began to weaken its grip on Bruno. The lack of blood flow to its brain was making it dizzy and confused. Jason maintained the hold with expert precision, knowing that timing was everything. He needed to keep the pressure on just long enough for the dog to let go, but not so long that he caused serious harm to the animal. The attacking dog finally released Bruno and fell to the ground unconscious, but still breathing normally. Jason immediately let go of his hold and rushed to check on Bruno, who was lying motionless on the grass. Blood was covering Bruno's neck and chest area, and his breathing was very shallow and weak. People who had been watching from a distance came running over to help. Someone shouted that they had called an ambulance for animals. Others offered towels and water to help stop the bleeding. Everyone was amazed at how quickly and professionally Jason had handled such a dangerous situation. Jason carefully lifted Bruno in his arms, trying not to move his neck too much in case there were serious internal injuries. Bruno was still alive, but barely conscious. His beautiful brown eyes looked up at Jason with trust and love, even though he was in terrible pain. Jason felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized how close he had come to losing his best friend. The owner of the attacking dog was standing nearby, looking shocked and scared. The man kept saying he was sorry and that his dog had never done anything like this before. Jason ignored him completely because all of his attention was focused on getting Bruno to a veterinarian as quickly as possible. The unconscious attacking dog was starting to wake up, and other people were keeping it away from Jason and Bruno. Jason knew he had only minutes to get Bruno professional medical help before the injuries became too serious to treat successfully. Jason ran toward his car while carrying Bruno as gently as possible. Every second felt like an hour as he tried to balance speed with care for his injured friend. Bruno was getting heavier in his arms, and Jason could feel warm blood soaking through his shirt. The dog was still breathing, but his breaths were becoming shorter and more difficult. Jason reached his car and carefully placed Bruno on the back seat. He grabbed a clean towel from his gym bag and pressed it against Bruno's neck wounds to try to slow the bleeding. Bruno whimpered softly when Jason touched the injured area, but he did not have the strength to move or resist. His normally bright and alert eyes were becoming dull and unfocused. While starting his car, Jason used his phone to call the nearest emergency animal hospital. His hands were shaking as he dialed the number that he had saved in his contacts for exactly this type of emergency. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered, and each ring felt like forever. A woman at the animal hospital answered the phone, and Jason quickly explained what had happened. He described Bruno's injuries as best as he could while driving through the London streets faster than he had ever driven before. The woman told him to bring Bruno immediately and that they would have a veterinary team ready to treat him as soon as they arrived. Jason drove like he was in one of his action movie chase scenes, but this time the stakes were real and personal. He ran red lights and took shortcuts through neighborhoods that he normally would never drive through. Other drivers honked their horns and shouted at him, but Jason did not care about anything except getting Bruno to the hospital in time. During the drive, Jason kept talking to Bruno, even though he was not sure if his friend could hear him. He told Bruno to stay strong and that everything would be okay. He promised Bruno that they would go for many more walks in the park after he got better. Jason's voice was shaking with emotion as he tried to stay positive while fearing the worst. Bruno's breathing was becoming even more shallow, and Jason could see that he was losing a lot of blood despite the pressure from the towel. The dog, who was usually so active and energetic, was now completely still except for the slight rise and fall of his chest. Jason pressed harder on the accelerator, knowing that every minute could be the difference between life and death. The animal hospital was located on the other side of the city and normally would take 25 minutes to reach during normal traffic. Jason was determined to get there in half that time. He used every driving skill he had learned during his movie career to navigate through busy streets and crowded intersections. Jason's phone rang, and he answered it using his hands-free system. It was his personal assistant calling about a movie meeting that was scheduled for later that day. Jason quickly explained that he had a family emergency and would not be available for any work-related activities until further notice. His assistant offered to help, but Jason told her the best thing she could do was cancel all of his appointments for the next few days. As Jason got closer to the animal hospital, he could see Bruno was getting weaker. The towel was now completely soaked with blood, and Bruno's eyes were closing more often. Jason began to panic that he might be too late despite all of his efforts to get there quickly. Jason pulled into the animal hospital parking lot and immediately saw 2 veterinary technicians waiting outside with a stretcher designed for injured animals. The woman from the phone call had kept her promise to have everything ready for their arrival. Jason carefully lifted Bruno from the back seat and placed him on the stretcher while explaining to the medical team exactly what had happened during the attack. The veterinary team rushed Bruno into the emergency treatment room while Jason followed close behind. The lead veterinarian, Sarah Mitchell, quickly examined Bruno's wounds and immediately understood how serious the situation was. She told Jason that Bruno would need emergency surgery right away to repair the damage to his neck and stop the internal bleeding. Jason watched as the medical team worked with professional speed and precision to prepare Bruno for surgery. They inserted an IV line to give him fluids and pain medication. They also put a breathing tube down his throat to help him get enough oxygen during the operation. Bruno looked so small and helpless, surrounded by all the medical equipment and bright lights. Mitchell explained to Jason that the attacking dog had caused severe damage to Bruno's neck muscles and had punctured several blood vessels. She said that Bruno had lost a dangerous amount of blood, and the next few hours would determine whether he would survive or not. Jason felt his heart sink as he realized how close he had come to losing his best friend forever. The surgery was going to take at least 3 hours, and Jason was not allowed to stay in the operating room. A nurse led him to a comfortable waiting area and offered him coffee and something to eat, but Jason was too worried and nervous to think about food. All he could do was sit in the chair and wait for news about Bruno's condition. Jason tried to distract himself by reading magazines and watching television, but nothing could take his mind off what was happening in the surgery room. He kept looking at his watch and wondering how much longer the operation would take. Every minute felt like an hour, and Jason found himself praying even though he was not normally a religious person. After 2 hours, Jason's phone started ringing with calls from his movie agent, his publicist, and several friends who had heard about what happened at the park. Someone had recorded the attack on their phone and posted it on social media, where it was being shared thousands of times. Jason ignored all the calls because he did not want to talk to anyone until he knew Bruno was going to be okay. Mitchell finally came out of the surgery room after 3.5 hours. She looked tired, but she was smiling, which Jason took as a good sign. She sat down next to Jason and explained that the surgery had been successful and that Bruno was going to survive. However, she warned that Bruno would need several more operations over the next few weeks to fully repair all the damage. Jason felt relief wash over him like a warm wave. He had been holding his breath for hours without realizing it, and now he could finally breathe normally again. Mitchell told him that Bruno was still unconscious from the anesthesia, but that he was stable and his vital signs were improving steadily. Jason asked if he could see Bruno, and Mitchell agreed to take him to the recovery room. Bruno was lying on a soft blanket with bandages around his neck and chest. He had several tubes and wires connected to machines that were monitoring his heart rate and breathing. Jason had never seen his strong and energetic friend look so fragile and vulnerable. Jason pulled a chair next to Bruno's bed and gently placed his hand on his friend's paw. He told Bruno that he was proud of how brave he had been and that he would stay with him until he woke up. The veterinary staff told Jason that he could go home and come back in the morning, but Jason refused to leave Bruno alone in the hospital. Mitchell brought Jason a pillow and blankets so he could sleep in the chair next to Bruno's bed. She explained that Bruno probably would not wake up until the next morning because of all the medication he had received during surgery. Jason did not care how uncomfortable the chair was because he wanted to be the first thing Bruno saw when he opened his eyes. During the long night, Jason thought about how much Bruno meant to him and how empty his life would be without his loyal companion. He made a silent promise that he would do everything possible to make sure nothing like this ever happened to Bruno again. Jason woke up the next morning in the uncomfortable hospital chair with a stiff neck and sore back. The first thing he did was check on Bruno, who was still sleeping but breathing much better than the night before. The monitors showed that his heart rate was normal and stable. Mitchell came in to check on her patient and told Jason that Bruno was recovering faster than she had expected. While Bruno continued to sleep, Jason had time to think about everything that had happened. He remembered the irresponsible dog owner who had lost control of his aggressive animal. Jason also thought about the attacking dog itself and realized that the animal was probably not naturally evil, but had been poorly trained and handled by someone who did not understand how to care for such a powerful breed. Jason made a phone call to Dr. Mitchell and asked about the condition of the attacking dog. She told him that the animal had been brought to their hospital the previous evening by animal control officers. The dog was physically fine but was scheduled to be put to sleep because it was considered too dangerous to be adopted by a new family. This news made Jason feel uncomfortable, even though the dog had nearly killed Bruno. Jason believed that animals were not born evil but became dangerous because of bad treatment by humans. He asked Devar Mitchell if there was any way to save the attacking dog's life, and she said it would be possible if someone was willing to pay for extensive behavioral training and rehabilitation. Jason shocked Dieter Mitchell by offering to pay for the attacking dog's veterinary care and professional training. He explained that he did not want any animal to die because of one bad incident, especially when the real problem was the irresponsible owner who had failed to properly train and control his pet. Der Mitchell warned Jason that this would be very expensive and time-consuming, but Jason said money was not important compared to saving a life. The decision became even more surprising when Jason chose not to press criminal charges against the attacking dog's owner, even though he had every legal right to do so. Jason's lawyer called him and explained that he could probably win a large amount of money in court and have the man sent to jail for owning a dangerous animal. Jason listened to all the legal options but decided that revenge would not help Bruno heal or prevent future attacks. Instead, Jason offered to pay for professional dog training classes for the irresponsible owner and his remaining pet. He also offered to pay for a dog psychology expert to evaluate both animals and determine what kind of training they needed. Jason believed that education was more powerful than punishment when it came to preventing future tragedies. The attacking dog's owner was amazed by Jason's generous and forgiving response. The man had expected to be sued and possibly arrested for what his dog had done. Instead, Jason was offering to help him become a better and more responsible pet owner. The man broke down crying and promised to do whatever it took to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. Der Mitchell and the veterinary staff were impressed by Jason's compassionate approach to such a traumatic situation. They had seen many cases where pet attacks led to court battles and revenge, but they had never seen someone respond with such kindness and wisdom. Several staff members said that Jason's response restored their faith in human nature. Jason also made another surprising decision about the media attention that the incident was receiving. Video of the attack and rescue had gone viral on social media, and news reporters were calling constantly asking for interviews. Jason could have used this publicity to promote his movies or increase his fame, but instead he refused to talk to any reporters. Jason explained to his publicist that he did not want to profit from Bruno's suffering or turn a personal tragedy into a publicity opportunity. He said that the only thing that mattered was Bruno recovery and making sure other pet owners learned how to prevent similar attacks. Jason instructed his team to donate any money offered by media companies to local animal shelters instead. Bruno finally woke up late that afternoon and saw Jason sitting next to his bed. His tail moved slightly in a weak attempt to wag, which made Jason smile for the first time since the attack. Bruno was going to survive, and that was the only victory that Jason cared about. Bruno came home from the hospital after 1 week, but he was not the same happy and energetic dog that Jason remembered. The attack had left physical scars on his neck and chest, but the emotional damage was even more serious. Bruno was afraid of everything, including sounds, smells, and movements that had never bothered him before. He would hide under furniture when visitors came to the house and refused to go outside for walks. Jason realized that helping Bruno recover would require much more than just medical care. He needed to help his friend overcome the fear and trauma that the attack had created in his mind. Jason canceled all of his movie projects for the next 3 months so he could focus completely on Bruno rehabilitation. His agent and movie studio were not happy about this decision, but Jason did not care about money or fame when his best friend needed him. Jason hired Dr. Amanda Foster, a professional animal psychologist who specialized in helping pets recover from traumatic experiences. Dr. Foster explained that Bruno was suffering from what humans would call post-traumatic stress disorder. She said that with patience and proper treatment, Bruno could eventually return to his normal happy personality, but it would take many months of careful work. The first challenge was getting Bruno to trust the world outside their house again. For weeks, Bruno refused to go past the front door, even though he had always loved their daily walks. Jason spent hours sitting on the front steps with Bruno, letting him observe the neighborhood from a safe distance. Slowly, Bruno began to realize that not everything outside was dangerous. Dr. Foster taught Jason special techniques for building Bruno confidence and reducing his anxiety. They started with very short walks around the block during quiet times of day when there were no other dogs or people around. Jason learned to read Bruno body language and recognize the signs that his friend was becoming scared or stressed. When this happened, they would immediately return home and try again later. Jason also had to learn how to help Bruno interact with other dogs again. The attack had made Bruno afraid of all dogs regardless of their size or temperament. Dr. Foster arranged controlled meetings with calm, friendly dogs in safe environments. These sessions were very difficult at first because Bruno would panic and try to hide behind Jason whenever he saw another animal. The recovery process was slow and sometimes discouraging. There were days when Bruno seemed to be getting better, and then suddenly he would have a setback and become afraid again. Jason learned that healing from trauma was not a straight line but involved many ups and downs. He had to be patient and supportive even when progress seemed impossible. Jason documented Bruno's recovery journey on his social media accounts to show his fans how much work was involved in helping a traumatized animal heal. The posts received millions of views and thousands of comments from other pet owners who had experienced similar situations. Many people said that Jason's dedication to Bruno inspired them to get professional help for their own pets who had behavioral problems. After 2 months of intensive therapy, Bruno finally wagged his tail when he saw another dog during one of their walks. It was a small step, but it represented major progress in his emotional healing. Jason was so proud of his friend's courage and determination to overcome his fears. Dr. Foster said that Bruno was doing better than most animals who had experienced similar trauma. Jason also worked on his own emotional recovery during this time. He had nightmares about the attack and felt guilty for not protecting Bruno better. Dr. Foster explained that humans can also develop trauma symptoms after witnessing violence against their loved ones. She helped Jason process his own feelings of anger, fear, and helplessness. By the end of the 3rd month, Bruno was taking longer walks, and he began playing with a few carefully selected dog friends. He was still more cautious than before the attack, but he was no longer paralyzed by fear. Jason knew that Bruno would never be exactly the same as he was before, but he was proud of how far they had both come in their healing journey. The experience taught Jason that recovery from trauma requires time, patience, professional help, and unconditional love. He realized that the bond between him and Bruno had actually become stronger through facing this challenge together. 6 months after the attack, Jason and Bruno were walking through the same park where the terrible incident had occurred. Bruno was wearing a special vest that identified him as a therapy dog in training, and he walked confidently beside Jason, without showing any signs of fear. The transformation was remarkable considering how traumatized he had been just a few months earlier. Jason had made the decision to turn their painful experience into something positive that could help other animals and pet owners. He established the Bruno Foundation, a charity organization dedicated to rescuing abused animals and educating irresponsible pet owners about proper animal care. The foundation was named after his brave friend who had survived the attack and inspired so many people with his recovery story. The Bruno Foundation provided free emergency veterinary care for pets whose owners could not afford expensive medical treatment. Jason remembered how lucky he was to have enough money to pay for Bruno's surgery and realized that many pet owners would have to watch their animals die simply because they could not afford to save them. The foundation helped hundreds of animals receive life-saving medical care during its first year of operation. Jason also used his celebrity status to promote responsible pet ownership and animal safety awareness. He appeared on television shows and gave interviews about the importance of proper dog training and responsible breeding practices. He explained how most aggressive dog behavior was caused by poor treatment and lack of training rather than natural meanness in the animals themselves. The foundation also worked with animal shelters to rescue dogs that had been labeled as dangerous and help them receive behavioral rehabilitation instead of being put to sleep. Jason hired professional animal trainers and psychologists to work with these pets and give them a second chance at finding loving homes. Many dogs that would have been killed were successfully rehabilitated and adopted by new families. Bruno became the official mascot of the foundation and regularly appeared at charity events and fundraising activities. His presence helped people understand that animals could recover from trauma and lead happy lives with proper care and support. Bruno seemed to enjoy his new role as an ambassador for animal welfare, and his friendly personality helped raise awareness about important issues. The attacking dog that had nearly killed Bruno was one of the first animals helped by the foundation. After months of intensive training and behavioral therapy, the dog was successfully rehabilitated and adopted by a family that specialized in caring for pets with special needs. Jason visited the dog regularly and was amazed by how gentle and friendly it had become under proper care and training. Jason also worked with lawmakers to create stronger regulations for dog ownership and breeding. He supported laws that required mandatory training classes for owners of large or potentially dangerous dog breeds. He also advocated for better enforcement of existing animal cruelty laws and increased penalties for irresponsible pet ownership that resulted in attacks on other animals or people. The foundation expanded internationally and began working with animal welfare organizations in other countries. Jason traveled around the world speaking at conferences and helping establish similar programs in places where animal protection laws were weak or non-existent. His fame and influence helped bring attention to animal welfare issues that most people had never considered before. 2 years after the attack, the Bruno Foundation had helped save over 5,000 animals and educated tens of thousands of pet owners about responsible animal care. Jason received numerous awards for his humanitarian work, but he always said that Bruno deserved all the credit for inspiring the foundation through his courage and recovery. Jason often reflected on how a single traumatic event had changed both his and Bruno's lives in ways they never could have imagined. What started as the worst day of his life had eventually led to helping thousands of animals and preventing countless similar attacks through education and awareness. He learned that sometimes the most painful experiences can become the source of the most meaningful and important work. Bruno lived a long and happy life as the beloved mascot of the foundation that bore his name. His story continued to inspire people around the world to treat animals with kindness and respect. Jason knew that his friend's legacy would continue helping animals long after both of them were gone.